evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rajesh Kumar Sinha from Southeastern Railway, Adra, West Bengal. I welcome all of you to this National Virtual Conference on Reinventing Excellence in Librarianship. To begin with, I would first like to greet Dr. Rama Patnaik, the Plenary Chairperson, at the same time all the other distinguished speakers who have spoken before me. The topic of this particular session, the last of this virtual conference, is library diplomacy. And the paper that I'm going to present is titled Libraries, a Strategic Diplomatic Tool. Now, to begin with, whenever we talk of library diplomacy, it sounds a bit different. Now, diplomacy is quite a different bit of thing, whereas library, usually we associate the word library with something, a place where we go acquire knowledge, information, share it with others, and enhance our knowledge of various things. Now, whenever we talk of diplomacy, diplomacy is an important part of foreign policy. A foreign policy which includes relations between various sovereign countries of the world. It could be bilateral, it could be trilateral, multilateral, or even quadrilateral. So whenever we talk of diplomacy, diplomacy involves some kind of persuasion, negotiation, different kind of communications, and nowadays we also come across that term called back channel diplomacy. So correlating the two, diplomacy as well as library, sounds a bit difficult, if not, and I would say if a bit unnatural too. But whenever we are going to, we should understand one thing, that each and everything, each and every domain of sciences, social sciences, everything has evolved over the period, over the last so many years. Library information science too has evolved. Now, talking of library and information science, it has evolved, it has changed its role, it has from merely a building that included document books and various documents, it has been converted into a digital library, virtual library, and probably in the next few years, maybe in the next few decades, we may come across various other modes of library too. So talking of library diplomacy maybe sound a bit difficult, different, but at the same time, it's not exactly impossible, and we need to think deeply about the connotations of what library diplomacy exactly entails. Now, starting with the origin of diplomacy, now diplomacy is basically relationship between different sovereign nations. Since the very ancient times, we have seen there have been diplomatic relationship between various countries, various important countries, especially of in terms of trade and commercial relations. Now, talking of India, even in the times of Chandragupta Maurya, the third in the third century BC, he had diplomatic relationship with various countries, including the very developed one from Greece. And Greece, the then ruler Seleucus had sent a diplomat named Megasthenes to India in the court of Chandragupta Maurya. We also know about Arthashastra, Kautilya's Arthashastra, and Kautilya, he was a guru of Chandragupta Maurya. Even in those ancient times, he had written a treatise on statecraft, Arthashastra, which most of us believe that it is relevant even to the contemporary times. International relations, relations between different nations, mostly between sovereign nations and international bodies. Foreign policy is a very important component of this international relation. And to pursue foreign policy through various means, diplomacy is to be used. Diplomacy and its tools, whenever we talk of tools, could be political, economic, cultural, as well as military. We all know that political tools are very common, and a lot of powerful countries, say example, United States of America, Russia, France, even China, and some other country, even India, have been using their political clout for furtherance of their perceived national interests. There is also economic tools that is also being used as a part of foreign policy, for a part of diplomatic process by various countries. Military tools, of course, is the last resort that any country prefers to use. Of course, different kind of military exercises, as is being shown in South China Seas or near the Taiwan, or even in our own country or at the Ladakh borders, all these are part of coercive diplomacy. Now, talking about the cultural diplomacy, it's as an important tool of international relations, important tool of diplomacy. Cultural tools. Well, there are various means, various tools of cultural diplomacy. Language, media, and of course, libraries. Talking of various institutions around the world, like we have USIS backed American libraries, British Council libraries, French Institut du Français or Alliance Française, in Spain, Institute Cervantes, Italy's China's Confucius Institute, Germany's Institute Goethe. All these institutions are there, which are in terms of UNESCO manifestations, UNESCO and IFLA manifestation, they are categorized as libraries because they promote reading habits, they promote cultural exchanges, and if you go through this, the presented table over here, you can very well see that all these major global libraries have presence across so many countries. Now, one important point that needs to be remembered is that all these global libraries, in the case of American libraries, British Council, Goethe Institute, or whatever, they are being run, managed by the respective foreign departments or foreign ministries of all these countries, except Confucius Institute of China. That, of course, is being run by supposedly an NGO, but as we all are aware that most of the things in China are being run by Chinese government directly or otherwise. So there a question arises: if diplomacy and libraries are so different, they do not, if they do not correlate with each other, then why all these foreign countries, these big countries, they have their foreign ministries controlling all these libraries, their operations, their regulations in so many parts of the world, so many countries of the world. There, of course, the reason is, of course, they have a particular role, they have a particular importance, and that importance is relevant in the context of foreign policy. Whenever we talk of libraries, what do? They do not merely share documents, they do not merely enhance knowledge. Whenever we talk of libraries being run by all these countries, they are used as part of a soft power of respective countries. Another important thing that needs to be understood over here is that all these libraries, global libraries, they are being run by major countries of the world. You talk of libraries being run by some nation like Jamaica, Zimbabwe, maybe Macau and other countries. No, they are not being run by those countries. So all these big countries are running. Why? Because they are using it as a means of soft power. They are using it as a means of public diplomacy. What these libraries do? These libraries promote the way of life, the way of thinking, values, political ideologies, cultural and social showcasing of all these important events in those countries, which, if are shared with millions of people, even in the remotest parts of the host countries, they can have a very important significance. There are members of British Council Library, American libraries in India, as well as Alliance Française and all that, who belong to middle classes, who belong to students, who belong to political leaders, who belong to intellectuals, and at the same time, many of them are also from bureaucratic classes. Even some politicians are members of all these libraries. So, how do they get influenced? They get influenced by watching their programs. They get influenced by seeing their documents, seeing their exhibitions, seeing their language, culture, films, and all that, that is being run, that is being shown, that is being promoted in those libraries. And they get influenced. They get to have a particular feeling, particular idea, particular perception of that particular country. In the process, whenever they get back to their place of work, they are bound to get influenced in some way or the other. In the process, in case of making of policy, in case of taking a decision, they can very well be influenced by those things which they come across in the respective libraries over there. It's not merely because these libraries or these respective governments want to provide reading or enhance reading habits of all these people of all these countries, and 100 or so many, more than 100 countries around the world. That is not the reason. The reason is very simple, that all these countries want to enhance their influence. Whenever we talk of diplomacy, diplomacy is a particular means of achieving desired objectives, which, as is perceived by the respective governments, has to be in conformity with the national interest of the country. Now, to protect and promote national interest of those countries, these countries are using libraries as an important cultural diplomatic tool. So it's not because of merely for any kind of reading habits or enhancement of better reading habits among the people of developing countries or other things. It's because these countries want to enhance their influence by using public diplomacy, by reaching out to the people, millions of people straight away in all these host countries. As I said, the role of various sciences, social sciences, has changed. Going by the Darwinian theory, struggle for existence and survival of the fittest, we all know that each subject has to refine itself. Each subject has to come up with new ideas, new thinking, new ways of presentations, so that these are accepted over an extended period of time. Now, in the midst of so many technological changes and internet and global village and all that, the libraries too have changed. Libraries too have evolved into digital libraries, virtual libraries, and maybe in the next few years we come across some more versions of contemporary libraries. So foreign ministries or for diplomats, foreign service officials, bureaucracy in all these major countries have realized that libraries can play a very important role in enhancing the importance of their countries. It's no wonder you will just see a particular example that in no time, in very few years' time, the Confucius Institute of China has moved up to almost 149 countries, and with the in the presence of with the in 149 countries with more than 530 libraries. Now, how it has done it? You have to correlate it with the rise of China in international arena. China has grown economically, politically, and even militarily, and in the process it has also enhanced its role. It has increased its role, the role of Confucius institution all over the world. It is not because merely China wants to promote Chinese language and culture. It is imperative to note that maximum number of Confucius institutes are in Africa, and there lies the maximum influence of China in Africa, and it has the maximum interest in Africa right now. So, library is also being used as an extensive tool of diplomacy in most parts of the world. However, we also have to understand one thing, that in these days of declining economies and COVID-19 and all that, there is a lot of cost question, or there is a lot of issue of cost cutting. Libraries are being downsized. A number of libraries, especially the American and British libraries, have been closed in many parts of the world. Their resources have dwindled. Their role has declined. But at the same time, you have to realize one thing, that they have maintained their presence in important countries as per their perception. They have maintained their presence, and they continue to patronage all those libraries around the world. So libraries are playing an important role as far as diplomacy and foreign policy is concerned. They will continue to play in the near future a role which will be commensurate with what the national interest is perceived by the respective governments around the world. Thank you. Thank you very much.